As the People Struggle Alliance, we have called this press to remember over 600 people who have died, over 100 who are still missing. Nearly 50,000 houses have been damaged on a conservative estimate, and people are still recovering, still recovering from this horrendous man-made as well as natural crisis which has come about our island. And we have stood with the people. We have done, all of us here, we have been part of volunteer movements which have been part of assisting people out of this, or being part of the recovery process. So we just want to remember people who are struggling at this point due to this cyclone. But this is not the first time island nation has gone through an environmental disaster and as well as a man-made disaster. We all remember the tsunami. And just like how young people and old people, volunteers came around and assisted people out of the tsunami crisis, while people were running around doing volunteer work, sharing whatever resources they had, ordinary people were doing that. The helping Hambantota crisis was happening, or the corruption was happening. So we remember this. And similarly, in 2022, when our country was in a deep financial crisis, thanks to the corruption of the political as well as the business elites, once again, 1 million people came to the streets and said no more. And there was a Aragalaya, and we said, go home, Gota. And then Ranil Wickremesinghe came to power, and he once again brought back the status quo. Immediately engaged with the IMF, immediately bought an IMF agreement. And while, as you remember, while 60% of our country was food insecure, IMF was prescribing austerity for our country. And at that time also, we didn't want to engage politically. We were helping people, we were helping as much as we could, but we did not want to, many of us did not want to, not we, many of us did not want to engage politically. And this same IMF negotiated debt agreement, we need to talk about that also. The IMF negotiated debt agreement, Sri Lanka went into that. And when Ranil Wickremesinghe went into this debt agreement, he took business elites like Duminda Hulangamua, who was the vice chairman of the Chamber of Commerce at that time. And his own members had become creditors for this government. They were also bondholders. And no surprise that our country did not get a proper negotiated debt restructuring. In fact, we are now paying 14% more than what we would have paid before the debt restructuring. So while this happened under the previous government, when this government appointed the Economic Recovery Committee, the same Duminda Hulangamua, who was part of this debt negotiation, a very corrupt debt negotiation, is now part of this committee to oversee the funds for the economic recovery. And not to mention people like Ishara Nanekara, one of the richest men in a country where 25% of people are under poverty line. His company is one of the many companies which has engaged in predatory microfinance. Between 2019 to 2022, nearly 200 persons died because they were unable to pay their debt. So this is the kind of business leaders and business elites which this government is hiding behind in order to prepare a system for the so-called economic recovery, disaster recovery of this country. So despite the fact that many of you, particularly on social media, have been defending this government and trying to protect this government, what we are asking is that in every crisis, ordinary people like us come together and assist, do whatever we can to pull people out of crisis, whether it be disasters like the tsunami or whether it be the economic crisis like what we saw in 2022, which continues to date. People come out onto the streets, people open their doors for their neighbors to help people come out of crisis, help people in whatever way we can to come out of a crisis. And while we are doing that, there is another section of our society, the political and business elite. They are making a cut out of every crisis which this country has faced. And this government, together with their business elites, is no different. If you look at the budget, if you look at how the budget was passed, it was passed without any substantial opposition from the parliament. Because I suppose if the opposition was in the government, they would have passed the same budget. So it was passed without any kind of substantial opposition. But if you look at the way, for instance, taxes are imposed on people, the government on the one hand comes and says we are aiming for the reduction of indirect taxes, but what is put in the budget is very similar to what we had in the last year's budget. 75% of our taxes is going to come out of indirect taxation, and a large percentage of this is going to be paid, is going to go into paying interest of bondholders, and particularly local bondholders. A large percentage of indirect taxes which are taken from food, from essential medicine, from school equipment. This is the money which is going to be used to pay the interest of some of our own local bondholders. So you see, this is the problem in our country. We go through a crisis, we all say we want to come out of it, but the government and its friends want to entrench the status quo. They want to entrench the status quo and continue as business as usual. So we are asking people, as the People's Struggle Alliance, we are asking people, we must help every single person we can at this point in crisis. We must extend our hands, we must help communities. But at the same time, keep your eyes and ears open to what kind of corruption, to what kind of deals are being done at the top tiers of this government, because otherwise, in a few years' time, once again, we will find ourselves in a similar situation, and we will once again run around trying to help people out of crisis while someone else is making a corrupt cut. I also want to specifically mention two issues which already existed, even in other times, but the cracks which this cyclone has opened is now exposing these things more and more. The plantation community, more than 2/3 of the persons who have died came out of the the plantation community, or the persons from the central province, and many of them are from the Malay community. And when we look at the disaster management system of this country, when we look at general systems of this country, in every step of the way, the Malay community is excluded. They are excluded as if they are not even part of our country in every single step, whether it be economic recovery, whether it be social recovery, and so on. And similarly, in the disaster management, the Malay community was not included. Particularly those who are living in the estates were not included. And so we see to date, bodies of persons of this community, Malay community, are buried under the rubble without anyone there to dig it up and give them a decent burial. And when we go and visit these people, what they have been asking for generation is for land rights. We want to have a land and a house in a safe place, so that at least our children do not have to be buried under the rubble when something like this happens. So we, as the People's Struggle Alliance, is standing with these people and demanding from the government that at least now you will not make a mockery of the demands of the Malay community and grant land rights which have been denied to these people for centuries, to grant land rights as well as housing for persons of the Malay community. And the other thing, of course, is once again we keep saying this over and over again, but it never happens, is the fact that many of the circulars which were issued, at least early on, and then after we demanded that the circulars be issued in both languages, then it came out in Tamil, but many of the circulars which were issued only in the single language. Now when we raised this, there were some ridiculous arguments made like, oh, why can't you use the AI and so on. That's not the point. The point is, in Sri Lanka, we have people who are Sinhala speaking and people who are Tamil speaking, and we have two national languages of this country, which is Sinhala and Tamil. And over again, the Tamil language have been ignored by the governments, consecutive governments, including the current government. And in a time of crisis, of course, overnight you can't repair this, but you saw what happened in a time of crisis, where only Sinhala circulars were being issued as if Tamil speaking people do not matter in this country. So we are asking the government, at least now, fix this in your system. Bring Tamil speaking people into the government sector, into the police, into disaster management sector, into institutions like the Mahavaliyata. Bring people who can speak both languages so that this language disparity will not impact people, will not impact lives in times of crisis. I do not want to speak about the disaster management system in this country, because by now every single person in this country knows that the disaster management system did not work. So what I want to say about that is that, we were listening to economists, right-wing economists, lazy economists, who kept on saying that the state should be underfunded, who kept on amplifying the IMF's call for austerity. And we see the consequences. We see the consequences of that right now. We see dead bodies on the ground. And now these same economists, without any kind of accountability, are now coming and asking the state to step in, when they are the ones who called for defunding of the state. And we see the consequence now. So at least now we hope that this kind of lazy economic neoliberal ideology people will stop repeating that. And we hope all of us realize the importance of funding the state, the importance of funding a proper healthcare system, the importance of having a proper disaster management system, so that next time when an island nation faces something of this magnitude, we will not be running around pulling people out of the rubble. Instead, people will be saved because we have structures and systems which are properly funded in place, even in times of normalcy. Thank you.
You're watching the Life Traveler channel.